welcome to this Sportradar Connect panel. Firstly, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Adam, and I'm the EVP of Global Marketing here at Sportradar. And I'm generally delighted today to host and moderate this panel on social media. And the panel today is on paid social, how targeted advertising delivers significant results for operators. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a very esteemed panel of experts who each bring both deep social media experience but also real knowledge and understanding of the category of betting and gaming. So without further ado, let's go and meet our panel today. So panelists, I'm going to ask for your name, where you're from, a little bit of your experience in social, but also your favourite social media accounts that you follow. So let's understand a little bit of the people we're going to be hearing from. I'll give you a few seconds. My favourite social media account is Foodie Therapy Official, mostly on Instagram. Lots of great Middle Eastern fusion cooking. Full transparency, just a myth bust that marketeers aren't transparent. It may be run by my wife, Mrs. Azor. But even with this bias, I recommend it for any foodies in the audience. So I'm going to start from my left. David, tell you, and you may or may not use a family member for your reference as well.
I may use your family member. I hadn't thought of this before. Hi guys, so I'm Dave Gilbert. I head up the Real Money Gaming team at Meta, formerly Facebook. I've been working in the social media space since probably about 2009. I set up the paid media division for We Are Social in 2012. I worked as head of social for Kenshu in EMEA until 2015, and then I've been at Facebook/Meta since then. My favourite account, possibly Britney Spears. This is why I'm wearing this as opposed to the mic. And Brendan, actually, you're coming on to He's Good Crack online, so I'd recommend following him. Just for the bags.
Don't worry about me over here, but anyway.
Yeah, no, you can tell your own story in a second.
See, this is when you have both Snapchat and Meta on the same panel. This is probably the start of how the topic's going to go.
I'm too old for Snap, so I don't know.
Here we go, here we go. I can introduce myself. I'm Carol Callahan. I'm an account executive at Snap. I have been in the industry for 5 years. I've been working at Snapchat for 5 years. Previous role, I actually worked with Brendan. I was working at Prospect, but he was actually my sales lead at Facebook, formerly now Meta. So I got to learn all the things that he did wrong I don't do. So there was a learning experience that happened there. But yeah, I'm an avid gambler. I've been gambling since I was a kid. I used to walk down to Paddy Power with my mother and bet on horses. So it makes sense that my favourite account to follow would be Paddy Mullins, son of Willie Mullins, famous National Hunt trainer. I go and look at his content all the time to see what's going on in the stable. So yeah, but happy to be here and happy to meet everyone.
Hey everyone, Brendan here, head of paid social at Sportradar. So my team basically have the pleasure of representing all of you guys in your business back to the social platforms Meta and Snap, who I love equally, no favourites. Been at Sportradar for 18 months now. Prior to that, worked 7 years at Meta in various gambling-related roles. Favourite social account? I'm going to give you two because they kind of go hand in hand. So one, Shit London Guinness. It's an Instagram account. If you ever order the Guinness in London, you'll know it's a bit of a lottery what glass it's going to be served in, how the quality will be. So there's some real amazing examples there. And then to kind of balance that out, there's a great partner account called Beautiful Pints, which is just beautifully paired Guinness. So check it out.
Thank you very much. So some great recommendations there. I can see everyone already on their phones following instantly, hopefully on Foodie Therapy Official. So I'm genuinely excited to hosting this panel on social media, and I personally have been running campaigns on social since around 2008. I started in that era very much around alcohol brands, so Carling, Grolsch, Coors Light, and in that era was very much the Wild West. I think we've been chatting to the panelists. I think we've all got our own stories and war stories from that era, which some of them will come out today, and maybe some of them will come out a bit later on. But I think alcohol is a really interesting category to look at, because certainly working in that era, alcohol very quickly understood the potential of social media when you're dealing with a restricted market, when you're dealing with over 18s, when you're dealing with regulations about how you can go to market. Since then, I've also worked on a number of brands across different categories, and with social, I really see a value in terms of both creativity and also effectiveness, which is really, really, as marketeers, what we're looking for. But paid social as a name I find very interesting, because I think the name is unique. We don't say paid advertising. We don't say paid events or paid experiential. But we say paid social. And I think this starts to play into what is unique about social media, because it's a channel that a lot of us have very personal experience with, and a lot of personal experience using. So I'd just like to pose a quick question to the audience. You didn't think you could have any participation just yet, but you are. Please raise your hands if any of you here have a social media account, and this includes LinkedIn. Please raise your hands. Okay, so we are all, that's a large number, right? For those watching, that's a substantial percentage, maybe 80, 90%. Now, also raise your hands if you ever post on any of those channels. Still, majority of everyone here. You are all creators. You are all have direct content creation experience in social media, which is really, really unique compared to any other channel. And this also brings a very unique challenge. And there's a lot of marketeers in the audience. We all know that everyone who doesn't work in marketing loves to have an opinion on marketing, right? Times 10 for social, which I think is why it leads to paid social, the naming, because it really starts to separate the performance side of social media. And I think that leads us very nicely into our first question, which is why use paid social as a part of a campaign targeting sports fans and bettors? And Kirill, would you mind starting us off on this question?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think it comes back to basics, really. So who is your customer, right? And where are they sitting, and where do they lie, and what do they do? I think we can all say that majority of people are on their phones. Like, when is the last time you went to a football game? Like, hands up if anyone went to a football game and didn't look at their phone for like the 90 minutes. You didn't? Is that a battery? Okay. But I think the whole idea is that, I mean, everyone is addicted to their phones, but also that they consume content there. And I think when you're thinking about sports, the whole dual screening approach, I'm watching a game, I'm also on my phone to see what's happening with my friends. Did they see the last score? And I think even with Snapchat, for example, 70% of our users are sports fans, so it aligns to the content piece there as well.
Yeah, I can't say, I mean, for me, when I first started selling gambling ads for Facebook 7, 8 years ago, we had a very different story. It was all about how targeted, how precise, how measurable paid social was as a channel. I think over the last 7 years, what we've seen is, you know, whether it's Facebook or Snapchat, they've emerged to be, you know, the single biggest media channels that you can buy now in a market like the UK. So they've gone from being targeted kind of sniper rifle approach actually to this incredibly broad brush, mass reach, you know, bigger scale than you can even get on commercial TV in key markets. I think that's been a big change that the industry has gone through.
I think it's a good point about the reach, but it's when you think about how advertisers operate, they're not just looking at buying in isolation for each of the channels that they work in as well. I think the thing about paid social is it complements not just TV advertising or the message that you're putting in outdoor, but it can also complement the organic activity that you're running as well. So there's an ability, once you've identified themes or creative or messaging that works well in your organic channel for free, you can amplify that to a much wider, broader audience using paid advertising on social as well. So I think they all serve purposes.
Yeah, I think that relationship between organic and paid is something maybe not everyone understands, David. So maybe if you don't mind just elaborating a little bit more about that.
So going back to 2012, I came out of one agency that was probably the biggest in the world at Facebook paid advertising, and I joined We Are Social, which was probably the market leaders in organic social, and they were very, very well established, award-winning, excellent team. You know these guys as well. But they'd identified that actually just doing organic social media wasn't enough anymore because of the changes that were being made to the algorithms by Facebook at the time. They realized that no matter how good their organic activity was, it just wasn't reaching the full community of people, fans, if you like, back then. I hate using that term. Anyway, the fan base wasn't being reached because the algorithm had changed. And I was brought in to basically help to combine organic and paid media together. To your question about the difference, the paid media side, I think, is fairly obvious. You know, if you have a message and you can get that in front of a user through paid means, then you'll probably see good conversion. The organic side is still a touch point with consumers who may not like ads. They might not agree with clicking on ads, for example, but they might be avid followers of, you know, I won't name a London football team, let's say Rangers instead. So, you know, they might be an avid follower of that, but they'll never click on an ad, or they think they won't click on an ad. And the point about organic is it still serves a very strong purpose if there's a social value proposition there. And I think coming from a paid media background, you don't always think about that. You just forget about organic and think that it's a waste of time because you don't reach the full audience. Actually, if there's a strong social value proposition for your free social media, it can actually help to amplify and create authenticity around your paid ads. So I'm a fan of both, believe it or not.
I think for me the challenge with organic is that it kind of, you don't achieve the potential of the platform, right? If we think about 3 billion users, you know, using paid social globally every month, you're not going to get your message out there with organic alone. And often people you do reach are the people who are already deeply engaged and love your brand, right? So you're not really growing your audience. I think, like, if we look at organic, this industry has been, I mean, they're probably the single best example of a brand doing organic social well in Paddy Power, right? I mean, I'd put them out of any industry, they're streets ahead. But that's actually probably been a terrible message for the rest of the industry, because we've seen this rise of copycat brands who do a really bad impersonation of Paddy Power on the organic side and think that, okay, we can go viral and we can cut through and have these amazing campaigns in the way that they can, and by and large they've failed, right? I mean, the investment needed to capture that lightning in a bottle the way that those guys did, it's very difficult, right? Often the more efficient approach is actually just lean into the paid media side.
I think you should have answered that first, and then I could have gone back to what I said. Because, like, the thing about Paddy's is they've got a really strong, like, there's a purpose there. There's a social purpose, and everything that they build around that makes complete sense. Whereas a lot, if you're suggesting rather than I suggest that some other operators are just trying to copy that, there's no authenticity there, and your user base realizes that.
I mean, it's an amazing experience to, like, scroll your Twitter feed during a big sporting event, and you just get copycat posts from every operator with no brand differentiation, no added value, no real message there, you know.
Just a different offer.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that uniqueness point, that context, again, is something which is so interesting for social, right? If we think back to classic advertising, we had ad breaks. You know, we knew where it is, we could go make a cup of tea, come back. It was a predetermined moment. With social, you don't have that timing gap. We are in users' feeds, experience at multiple times. So with great power comes great responsibility, right? There's a great opportunity there to really capitalise, especially within sport, of real in-time moments. But the execution is so important within those two.
Yeah, you said it well. I mean, you're engaging with them in their newsfeed on their terms. There's not a scheduled ad break that the entire audience is going to see. So you have to be respectful of that, right? You can't just go in and do this broad brush message that goes out to everyone in a very shouty way. At the same time, there's a balance, because I mean, you know, I'd often hear from the social platforms, they've got a new placement, a new format, and they say, okay, you have to make sure you don't poison the well in terms of being too commercial and just be really authentic and fit in with the organic stuff. At the same time, you have to remember, we're working in advertising, we do have to sell, we have a responsibility also to deliver a commercial message. So you don't want to go over correct either and just go too much in the content and not enough on the marketing side, you know.
Good advice. And just following on from that theme, Brendan, there's probably quite a large percentage of operators still not currently using paid social to engage customers. So what are the barriers and considerations to doing that properly?
I mean, first of all, it's absolutely true. I mean, I remember back in my time at Facebook, we actually pulled the data to show like the distribution of spend across the industry, and it was super top heavy. Now every industry is top heavy with the Pareto curve, whatever. But gambling was even more pronounced. So the guys who were doing it well were really seeing great success, but a lot of the industry weren't really doing it well at all. And when I joined Sportradar, I had conversations with operators all over the world, and actually really common themes came out. Like when you'd sit with a director of digital or a CMO, paid social is often seen primarily as a media buying challenge, right? We need to hire people or outsource to a media buying agency to optimize the campaigns in Ads Manager. But actually what I've found from working with those bigger advertisers who are spending 9 figures a year on paid social is that really that media buying element is just one piece of the jigsaw, right? In order to do paid social really well, you need to have creative that's fit for the platform, that's fresh, that's relevant, that's constantly being updated. You need to be able to measure it properly. We know as an industry we love measuring on a post-click, last-click basis. Social can work in that framing, but it's also capturing only a tiny part of the value. I think the most important piece that operators struggle with that's really key for success today is the technical integrations, right? How well are you able to represent your business into the social platforms? If you can't do that, you can have the best crack, media buying team in the world, but if they're not armed with all these other supporting resources, they're not going to get the best of the channel.
Are you including measurement in that?
Yeah, for sure.
That's good. I don't need to answer them.
Yeah, I will say, just teeing on from Brendan, I think creative, fundamentally for us, has always been a barrier, and I think it's just understanding that different platforms have different ad products. I think for us, obviously, we play in the augmented reality space. Historically, people said it's really expensive, but actually there's value to it, and the juice is worth the squeeze. So I will say, just understand each of the different ad formats, and then understand what each of the value that they can bring in. But that's historically been a definite barrier for us. But once you get it right, you're golden.
I mean, on the creative side in particular, even today, I don't think the decision makers really know how many people are seeing their ads on social. And often, they go to brief the creative agency, and the hero asset deliverable would be a TV ad, 30-second or 60-second TV ad. And often that's just put on paid social in a very rudimentary way, and it doesn't really portray the brand in a positive light, even though maybe 2-3 times more people are going to see that ad on social versus on TV, right? So there needs to be, I think, the perception has to catch up with the reality still to a large degree.
I think the other piece in there, just to kind of cap it off, is that a lot of the advertisers that we work with, they actually don't know what good looks like. They're happy hitting a target cost per acquisition or cost per install, but actually to predict the lifetime value of the customers they're generating isn't always that easy either. And I think one of the advantages that people like you guys at Sportradar have is you're looking across a whole bunch of operators. So you'll be able to see with a much broader lens what good actually looks like in any given marketplace where they're operating. So there is some value to what you guys do.
Some value.
Yeah.
What a quote that is for the poster.
You can quote me on that.
We definitely will. And so let's work on the assumption that everyone has listened to you talking very positively and closing these barriers, and they're saying, right, we're going to get started now on paid social. Mm-hmm. Do you have any tips for how to get started? And Dave, we're going to start with you.
Fantastic. I would almost start with the finish. Like, what's the goal you're trying to achieve? Okay, so I'll make an assumption here that you want to get your message in front of as many of your target audience as possible. For as efficient a media cost as you can. And that's a role that paid social, if we're going to call it that, pays very well. So if you think about TV being the first place that most marketers will start with, okay? TV is an excellent channel for getting that broad reach. You can make it very contextual as well through the placements that you buy. The cost is the cost, and although that's coming down, it's still relatively expensive. So people like William Hill, for example, we ran studies that showed the impact of TV plus Facebook. And we actually found that the two channels complemented each other really well. And whereas the reach for TV amongst the target audience was slightly higher, what they found was that the incremental reach from Facebook was significant. And the cost efficiency was about 5 times cheaper. So by balancing up and stacking the different channels together, you can actually get a really effective overall marketing campaign. But I would always start with that. What are you trying to achieve, and which of the building blocks, if you like, when you're putting them together, which ones are helping to add extra value to the overall build that you're doing and make the most out of your budget. And then when you break it down from there, it goes into the creative and the optimization. Do you have the resource to actually run the campaign and give it the attention that certainly Facebook ads and Instagram ads needs? You know, I would never recommend a DR campaign being just left to run for a month. That's a quick way to burn through a lot of money at this time. We'll come on to AI later and automation, which will hopefully help address that. But start with the building blocks, figure out what the role is you're trying to do, and then understand whether you're equipped in-house to actually run the campaign you want to run, or whether you do need to deploy or employ agencies or third-party partners to help you.
Yeah, and just leading on from that, from Dave, I think a good piece of advice as well is just to reach out to the media owner, right? Like, do your due diligence, research, like understand what your competitors are doing, what platforms they're currently on, obviously understand your audience, map out your KPIs, but also reach out to the platform because they're going to know best on how to address your needs and respond to your RFP. And if they don't respond, well, then it's on them. But otherwise, yeah, call me.
I think that's actually a really good point, because obviously no one likes being sold to, right? What I would say, my experience, again, selling ads for 7 years, but also working with these guys in the last 18 months on the other side of the table, is that they genuinely have your best interests at heart, right? So it can be, it's good to maintain a healthy suspicion, but actually, like, generally they grow as you guys grow. They want you to see performance so that you will continue to invest. So, you know, as my approach always to working with the platforms is to give them as much context as possible so they can offer better recommendations. I think avoiding that super transactional kind of relationship, it's if you do that, you're not really maximizing what you could. These are very smart people, essentially, right? So.
Wow.
Everyone's been far too nice. Right. I thought it was going to be a little bit more dynamics going on. We've got Snapchat, we've got Meta.
I'm on very good behavior so far.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie.
This wasn't what it was like in the pre-conversation.
This is not my norm, I promise.
We're going to have a scrap later outside, don't worry about it.
Perfect.
So I want to dig into probably one of the toughest questions now, which is, what are the tips for operators who have invested in social media, paid social media, but feel like they are not getting the desired return on investment? How can they improve their strategy? And Brendan, let's kick that off with you.
I mean, I kind of mentioned there's a lot of elements that goes into success on paid social. So there's the campaign management piece for me nowadays is the most straightforward piece. I mean, the main advice I give to anyone is get out of the way of the algorithms. Don't overly segment. Don't overly put your finger on the scales, let's say. Typically, there's kind of two common reasons I would see campaigns fall down. One is we're not feeding the platform with high quality signals, right? And that's really table stakes now. If you're not telling Facebook or Snapchat this is the type of customer I want to go and get, then those algorithms that are powered by data centers bigger than my town aren't able to really deliver on, right? So you need to, as I say, do that kind of hard yards up front, do that integration to make sure that you're feeding those algorithms with as high quality data as possible. The second piece, and again, like, this was always very difficult when I was in sales, was not providing enough budget for the campaign to actually do well. And this is super counterintuitive. Like, you'd have a client and they say, the channel's not working, and we say, okay, you need to double the budget, or you need to 5x the budget. But actually, if they would trust you on that, typically you would see the results. There's this concept on Facebook of the learning phase, which you may know. And basically, they say that you shouldn't read into performance on a campaign unless it's achieved 50 conversions per campaign per week. If that's 100 quid CPA, that's minimum 5,000 a week before you even start looking at performance. And obviously, as a responsible marketer, you don't want to make blind bets. You want to dip your toe in and scale as you see success. But actually, there is a minimum that you do need to hit to jump in and kind of see that performance. So it's not for the timid, I guess.
we had an example with a client in the US market, Barstool. None of them are here today, so I can speak about them. But yeah, they literally were spending pennies and wanted all the results in the first week. And I think that's another piece. Like, people expect results instantaneously because it's digital media, but actually you have to lean in and put a timeline to it. Like, don't expect everything to happen all of a sudden. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a couple of weeks, and put that timeline in place so that you don't have a low expectation.
I want to dig a little bit more into the technology, and specifically the technology behind social media channels and how it can provide specific targeting. What advantages does that bring? And Dave, maybe you could kick that off for us.
So in terms of like how the auction works, or in terms of the algorithms and the automation tools that we have?
I think for the audience here, it'd be really interesting to understand, from that level of data within within a paid social media campaign compared to maybe more traditional media, how does that really drive an advantage in this channel compared to more mainstream marketing choices?
Okay, it's a good question. So the reason it works is because we've got so many advertisers that are like advertising, serving impressions on a daily basis. I think we've got. I hope this is allowed to be mentioned, but we've got 3 billion monthly active users now on our platform as of the last earnings call. So you're speaking to a huge percentage of the world, and we're understanding what makes them up, what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, what they're clicking on, what they're not clicking on is equally important. And we're able to build up an idea of where to serve impressions in order to get the successful outcomes that you're looking for from your campaigns, whether that's an awareness campaign or an installs campaign or a conversion campaign for direct response. Now, all of that is obviously kept black boxed away from everybody, but the AI and the automation tools we've got are best in class. I think we honestly believe that. It's no secret if you read the press that we've doubled down on our AI capabilities, and that's one of our big bets for the future. So we're getting much more into generative AI now, which will help advertisers to actually create new iterations of their ads without having to do it manually. You can get new backgrounds already, you can get new copy already. You can start looking at when you create an ad, it will also create all of the different formats that you might need for our platform in the future, which would normally have taken yourselves or agencies a lot of time to do. So the AI element of what we do is making things much more efficient, and that efficiency drives cost efficiency and performance for our advertisers. And then in the future, we've got a discovery engine, which is the second tier of our AI, which is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's where a lot of our money is going as well, where we're trying to move not just from the standard placements that we used to work in into things like Reels discovery to try and kill TikTok, if you like. If you're looking for sound bites, we're coming for TikTok. So
we aligned on this earlier today.
But look, we've touched upon probably a subject which is front of mind for a lot of people here in this audience, and that's around AI, and specifically around AI-driven personalisation. And the big question around it is that something that can be applied to paid social? Dave, you gave us a little taster, but Kirill, we'd love to get your perspective on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is yes. Leading on from Dave, I think if you look at the product innovation that we've done with Snap, we've recently launched Chat AI. So if you go into your Snapchat, you look in the chat section of the app, you'll see your personal assistant. So I'd like to give the example of, okay, who's playing tonight in London? If I type that into my Chat AI, I can see automatically Arsenal, no, they're not actually playing, but Arsenal are playing at 8 p.m. Where can I get tickets? And then imagine being able to place ads within that inventory. Like, it's a really cool and strong example of like delivering the right message at the right time. I think another really strong example is what we did with Sportradar, which is the dynamic live odds lens with our colleagues with an operator over in the US market. I won't name them. But they're sitting here. But yeah, so we basically launched a live feed, and so that therefore we had our augmented reality lens. We were able to pull in the odds as well as the live scores, and then users were able to go in and actually install the app itself. And what we saw was really strong results when it came to re-engagement, because we're using the UX of the actual app itself in the lens. So we're getting users back in to install the app, but also it was really helpful with user acquisition. So again, it's just a good example of the dynamic features that we have, a much more personalized approach to advertising.
I mean, I think it's been interesting from the outside seeing this transition from, I mean, Meta in particular. When I left, we just rebranded as Meta, and we were the Metaverse company.
We had a lot of damage to fix after you got
I know, scorched earth. But obviously since then, AI has become so buzzy. And it's not even that the platforms are doing more in AI, they're just talking about it more. And I saw, you know, when I first started working with performance advertisers on Meta, best practice was have really, really smart media buyers who would buy 10,000 campaigns, micro-segmented. You'd have your 18 to 24 cohort in Thailand, and they'd have a different bidding than all your other different demographics globally. And then over the years, the AI, the algorithms have just been chipping away at the roles that the human, the buying team have been doing. And I think for the most part, that's been pretty well welcomed, because no one really jumps up out of bed in the morning excited to be building campaigns on Ads Manager. But I think what's interesting now in the last couple of months even actually is that AI is coming for the fun parts of marketing. It's coming for the creative production pieces and all these types of areas. And that's frightening, I think, for every marketer, because you don't want to give all control of your marketing decisions, where your media spent, where your audience is targeted, what your creative is showing, to the machine. So that's something we're going to have to navigate.
I would agree.
No, and then the other risk, particularly for us in this room, is, you know, we have heavy compliance obligations. We can't afford to get the wrong message out there. We can't say, oh, well, the AI did it. We're still getting a fine. So we need to kind of square that circle as well. And just building on that, I mean, one of the things that I was super proud of actually was when the white paper came out in the UK about future gambling regulation. They actually called out the work that Meta and Snap have done using their data and their capabilities and their topic detection powered by AI to have a gambling opt-out. So if you're struggling with a gambling addiction, you can actually say, do you know what, I don't want to see any gambling ads. Quite often, you know, data-led advertising gets a lot of stick, but actually this is a great example of that. Can also be a force for good, not just for performance and cheaper CPAs, but actually also for helping us, you know, fulfill our compliance obligations and be protecting vulnerable users.
I think the work that we did to get to there in terms of the UK and, you know, the position of the white paper was immense. Behind the scenes, we were trying to back up the operators and, you know, help to get a decent outcome. The worry, going back to your point about, you know, the algorithm doing it is about, well, what about Belgium? What about the Netherlands, where they're saying that they need to have interest targeting overlays, which, you know, basically that takes away all of this power from the AI potentially, unless we can build around that. And that's the stuff that's keeping me awake at night just now, while I'm trying to figure out how can we be compliant and make sure that the way that operators use our platforms is completely compliant in terms of defending and looking after vulnerable people and underagers and stuff, while still making sure that you guys benefit from the full capabilities of our platform. So yeah, we're working hard on that behind the scenes now. I'm happy with the UK just now. Now it's.
But I mean, it was a wake-up call, right? Because Italy were the extreme. They just did a blanket tobacco-style advertising ban, and then I woke up and 5% of my revenue was gone.
But the challenge for us is we can't go in and just start advocating the way that maybe you guys would like, or that the operators would like, because like that has a negative potential impact, reputational impact on Meta and Snap and TikTok and everybody else as well. And so us wading in, giving our 2 cents can backfire if then the regulators, you know, release some kind of, you know, article saying, yeah, we've told Meta to piss off.
So it's interesting because obviously as agnostic platforms you can't be going in to bat for the gambling industry. But at the same time, we talked earlier, like there is a misperception about what paid social is, and actually just educating in a factual way, these are the capabilities, these are the controls that are available. I mean, we've seen it pay off, right? Not just in the UK, but Spain, we have the carve out as well. So.
Well, the Netherlands, there's a talk just now that operators are going to need to prove that their on-target age accuracy is 95% or above. And that's really daunting when you think about it, but we've actually done those tests in the UK, and we came out 95% plus. So if we can get the same in the other markets, and that becomes like a European mandatory stance, then we're in a good place. And that's because we've got this, to your point earlier about the background information, we've got that. So we're in a better place. It's a safer place to spend your money, I would take. End of sales pitch.
One of the outcomes around the discussion on an area that you talked in, what I find very interesting, is specifically around automation. And with automation, especially from the audience here today and watching, is what role do you see automation playing in developing in the future, and those real sort of benefits? And maybe Dave, you could start us in that way.
Yeah, look, we've covered a lot of this already from my perspective, but in the short term, it's going to be about taking away the tedious jobs, the time-consuming jobs of actually setting up and running ad campaigns, optimizing campaigns, changing creatives, testing copy, at scale really, really quickly in a way that doesn't mean you pausing ads or screwing up A/B tests or whatever. Automation can take care of all of that. In the short term, that would be our main focus. The second tier for Meta is about discovery. So at the moment, you've probably got an idea that your audience is, 25 to 45, football fans, love sport, occasional bettors, whatever. That's only going to ever target a certain puddle of people. I'm going to call them a puddle. They're valuable puddle. But you're going to be targeting that puddle with every ad that you run, and so is everybody else in your competitive ecosystem. Whereas there's still this huge ocean of other potential people who may actually be betting somewhere else that you're just not aware of, or maybe have a propensity to consider betting for entertainment in the future. And AI will help to discover, to put your content in front of them so they can discover the entertaining factor of RMG activity as well. So discovery and performance.
Yeah, I think that helps with cost efficiency across the board as well. If we think about automation when it comes to creative, like how much money can that save? Like we talked about creative being a barrier to entry, but if we can automate that process, then obviously that's going to help bring in the big bucks.
I mean, if you look at the biggest digital native verticals, I think travel in particular, Expedia will spend literally billions a year on Google, for example, right? But the way they market, they don't have hand-cranked campaigns targeting people who are looking to fly to Rome or book a hotel in Barcelona. It's all happening through automation, through dynamic ads. Same with e-commerce, right? So if you go clothes shopping and then suddenly you're getting the clothes you almost bought following around the internet, right? This is all dynamic ads. So the challenge with sports betting is how do you keep up with the relentless speed of the sporting calendar, right? Rome is Rome and it's not going anywhere, and fashion lineups may change every season or every decade in my case, I guess. But with sports betting, it's every day. It's just incessant, and it's not possible for a business to manually create those ads. So I do think automation has a role to play there, particularly in a market like the UK where everybody has seen the Bet 10 Get 40 football ad now. We don't need to serve any more of these ads. I think the opportunity is reaching people on the fringes of gambling. An amazing stat I read at the weekend on the Betfair Exchange was more money bet on the Eurovision than on the Grand National. But how often are we talking to the types of punter who bet on the Eurovision or bet on tier 2 sports? So Formula 1, I'm a huge Formula 1 fan, as many of you will know. Never see a Formula 1 ad in my newsfeed. Boxing, crickets. I mean, there's just so many audiences that aren't interested in football. But if you speak to them on their terms, then you can drive that conversion and grow the audience, right? Which is also ultimately what the industry has to do. We need to get away from the reliance on those core gamblers, as we call them, and reach these people who will come in and bet 50 quid on the Eurovision and so on,
Brilliant. Well, wonderful food for thought across all of those questions. So thank you, all of you, for contributing to that conversation. We're now going to go and open this out to the audience. So if anyone has a question for this wonderful panel we've assembled around social, we'd love to hear from you. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? First panel, is everyone shy? Is there a burning question from anyone? I think you've all done such a wonderful job in answering all the questions and myth busting. But I'm going to leave it with one final question then, quick fire round, which is, for each of you, please tell me, what does the future have in store for paid social? Brendan, why don't we start with you and work to the right?
I thought I had more thinking time there.
Yeah, I would have put them down your end anyway, don't worry.
It goes to this topic of regulation, which Ryan referred to earlier. I think it's really a knife edge. I mean, we've seen when it goes badly, we get the tobacco style ban. When it goes well, we're able to protect the vulnerable users, but still have this channel that allows you to reach the people and grow your business in a responsible way. So, and unfortunately, that seems to be playing out on a market by market basis. So in some cases, social is going to be this amazing opportunity. Think of UK, Spain. It's thriving. We look at Italy, it's basically not an option anymore. And then we see Netherlands, Belgium, we're not sure. Obviously, there's a lot of eyes in the US now. I think the great thing about the US is they've kind of learned from the shit show that the UK was in the last 10 years. Yeah. So they're getting ahead of these topics. And I think if it goes well, then social can be positioned to be one of the largest, most performant and most responsible channels that operators can use.
Yeah, I think teeing on from that, at Snap, we're building the sports audience for the future. Like, gone are the days where people are watching a football game, like an NFL game for 4 hours, or a soccer game for, I can't believe I'm saying soccer, a soccer game for 90 minutes. But I think when it comes to Snap, our focus is going to be on augmented reality and where we can win big there, and augmenting the world around you. It's not a fake universe, it's the reality of what we're living in now. So that's going to be our big bet for the future, and how that plays out within paid social will be quite interesting.
And yeah, for Meta, we've got kind of like a leadership position in terms of our reach, our global reach, and the number of eyeballs that we can get our messaging in front of. For us, it's the same. It's making sure that we are responsible with that reach, if you like, and making sure that we're working with yourselves, the operators, working with the regulators, working with the Meta business partners, to build a future for the RMG industry that's extremely successful for you guys and for us. But it's also done in a responsible way. And a lot of my discussions in my role in the EMEA region is regulatory at the moment, rather than trying to sell anything. We're trying to make sure that we're positioning ourselves for the future as well.
Brilliant. Well, everyone. Oh, we have one question.
I've got a question for Gilbert. Full disclosure, I am a Sportradar employee, but this is not a bar.
Right.
Well, before you go,
I'll hear it first. Yeah.
We're going to ask you, what is your favourite social media account that you follow, or favourite platform if that's easier for you? So, who you are and what your favourite social is.
That's a great question. I think there's an Instagram account called Picturesque Cricket Ground, which is a really good one, and I'm pretty sure yours has been on there.
That's good.
There's a really nice cricket ground in Switzerland in between a bunch of mountains and covered in snow, which I'd love to play at if Sportradar wanted to sponsor me. Question for you, Gilbert. You mentioned in the Netherlands they're looking at this 95% confidence interval. If, God forbid, the social media platforms fall short of that, what advertising can be done where they're confident that 95% of people are?
And that's why it's keeping me awake. So it's a great question. Like the 95% number that was landed on is tenuous anyway. I'm not going to sit and speak about legalese at the moment, but as it stands just now, you need to show that you have, there's wording for this, but basically you have reason to believe that it's 95% accurate. And what the discussions are apparently pushing for is proven 95% accuracy. Now, we used to be able to do that at Facebook through our partnership with Nielsen. In fact, all of you guys could do that through Nielsen. Now I don't think that we're doing that anymore, so we're looking for another partner that will be accepted by the Dutch authorities to prove that out in the first instance. Then potentially the onus will be on you guys, the operators, to show that you're doing these testing as well. So you'll need to be able to show either that you've tried or that you have actually succeeded in getting 95% on target accuracy above, I think it's above 18, but it might actually be above 24 in order to go forward. So 24, thanks for that, Abby. So it's above 24. And we're working really hard to make sure that that lands in a place that's going to be workable for everybody. But yeah, these are the questions, because if we get this wrong, the whole industry's wiped out in an entire country.
Is it only going to be paid social?
Well, they've already shut down a lot of the other channels, and digital can't do it. Paid social was exempted because we are showing that we can target to that level of accuracy. We've already proven that. But like the 95% mark is very high. To put that in context, guys, the ASA standard's like 75. So now we're going from 75, which a lot of platforms and a lot of channels can probably verify, to 95, which basically shuts down everyone. Which, in theory, like I should be jumping from the rafters, because if Facebook's the only one that can do that, then happy days. But actually, it worries me about the future and about where that takes us. So, food for thought for sure. Yeah, that's it.
No pressure.
Glad I work in the US.
Oh, I think we have one more question coming in.
Hi, everyone. Also from Sportradar. But this is a question, let me know if you understand it or not, because I kind of just thought about it. But, given that I'm from the United States, where the regulatory environment around gaming is very different, and it's also varied from state to state, and I'd be curious to understand from a social perspective whether there's any way to calculate kind of how there's a sort of market potential or dynamic market potential. I think on the panel there was some comments about how you can opt out of messaging, within your feed and within the gaming sector in specific. There's obviously a much stronger social network effect given the changes and nuances in culture between gaming in the Eurozone versus the US. So is there a way to understand from social kind of how that dynamic market exists within the context of the United States?
I mean, I'll defer that because I look after the EMEA region, so I'm getting a pass on this one.
Okay.
But we do have ways of checking audiences, and the audience overlaps. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question you're trying to ask is, like, I'm trying to understand the question.
Yes,
So
I know. It's kind of like a little bit of a nuanced question, but like, is it just as important to understand what audiences are entering into that market? Like, how many people are potentially interested in gambling versus how many people already exist within that segment versus how many people are opting out,
Yeah, I think like when we looked at the numbers on our end, the amount of people that were opting out was quite minimal. I think the US market's different because I think it's not part of culture the way it is in the UK. Like, it's a cultural identity to gamble. As I mentioned, growing up as a child, like, it was surrounded by it, where it hasn't been the same in the US market. But I think with the onset of content creation, it's becoming a lot more au fait with users. So I do think that there hasn't been a massive, decline because people can opt out of it. I think that there's an appetite in the US market, and that appetite will only grow, from my experience.
I mean, I think one of the things that stood out for me with the US, like the pace of how quickly that market has matured has been insane. But that's largely been driven by any operator who had access to a sports or a sports-adjacent audience had a massive head start. Right? You look at the market leaders, FanDuel and DraftKings, they built their sportsbook businesses on what was a very healthy daily fantasy brand, right? This kind of Trojan horse of betting, if you like. You see BetMGM and Caesars had their large retail casino loyalty programs. They were able to kind of shortcut, to a large extent, like getting in front of as many sports fans as possible. You guys may have seen the recent news from Fanatics as well. Fanatics now are very aggressively about to enter the US market with what they say is the largest database of sports fans. So I think, what took the UK 20 years to kind of reach that maturity, the US is doing in 5 since FASPA was repealed, right?
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. Well, I think that ends us perfectly on time. So I think all that's left to say is thank you very much for this panel. I hope everyone in this audience enjoyed that conversation and took something out of it. Thank you ever so much for that panel.
Thank you.